In the quiet suburbs of Sweden, a young woman's life was brutally cut short, leaving a nation reeling and the world questioning. Saga Elneborg, a 20-year-old who was 7 months pregnant, was found murdered in her own apartment, a place that should have been a sanctuary as she awaited the birth of her child. The crime wasn't just heinous, it was profoundly unsettling, unraveling threads of cultural conflict, familial expectations, and the dangerous weight of societal pressures. This documentary delves deep into the events surrounding Saga's tragic death in April 2023, a case that has sparked heated debates across Sweden and beyond. Was it an act of personal betrayal, a crime fueled by cultural incompatibilities, or something far more sinister? At its heart lies a story that challenges our understanding of love, loyalty, and the lengths to which fear can drive a person. As we unravel this harrowing tale, we invite you, the audience, to examine the evidence, weigh the motives, and form your own judgment on a case that still echoes in the hearts of many. Saga was a 20-year-old woman brimming with hope and excitement for the future. At 7 months pregnant, she was eagerly anticipating the arrival of her baby boy, due in June 2023. Described by friends and family as kind, determined, and nurturing, Saga had embraced the challenges of young motherhood with a mature sense of responsibility. She had been in a relationship with her partner, Mohammed Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim, since the fall of 2021. Together, they planned to raise their child, despite the cultural and personal obstacles they faced. Saga's pregnancy brought her immense joy, and she often shared photos of her growing baby bump with friends and family. She took proactive steps to prepare for her new role as a mother, attending prenatal classes, researching childcare, and carefully curating a space for her child in their apartment. Saga's family stood by her through every step of the pregnancy, with her mother, Melissa Elneborg, often staying with her to help around the house and provide emotional support. Despite moments of anxiety, especially concerning Amin's hesitancy to reveal their relationship to his family, Saga remained optimistic and focused on the love she already felt for her unborn son. Tragically, Saga's dreams for the future would never come to fruition. Her life, filled with so much anticipation and promise, was cut short in an act of unfathomable violence, leaving her family and loved ones devastated and searching for answers. Saga Elneborg's days leading up to the tragedy were marked by both excitement for her baby's arrival and growing tension with her partner, Mohammed Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim. Saga had been meticulously preparing for her new role as a mother and eagerly assembling baby gear, attending prenatal classes, and organizing her apartment for the baby's arrival. Her family, especially her mother, Melissa, provided steadfast support, staying with her intermittently to help during the pregnancy. Despite this strong familial backing, Saga's relationship with Amin faced mounting challenges. The primary source of tension stemmed from Amin's reluctance to reveal their relationship and Saga's pregnancy to his conservative Somali Muslim family. At 7 months pregnant, Saga was understandably anxious about her future and the family she hoped to build with Amin. For his part, Amin struggled with fears of rejection and dishonor from his family, who he believed would disapprove of the relationship due to cultural and religious differences. On April 28, 2023, Saga was last seen alive during a dinner outing at Mocha Deli with her family and friends. Though she tried to enjoy the evening, those close to her noticed she was distracted and visibly anxious. Amin had promised to inform his family that evening about their relationship, the baby, and their plan to move into a larger apartment together in the coming weeks. However, Saga's nervous glances at her phone and her short-clipped responses betrayed her unease. Later that evening, Saga decided to leave the gathering early and return to her apartment. Citing fatigue, she continued to message Amin late into the night, seeking reassurance that he had followed through with his promise. Unbeknownst to Saga, Amin had decided not to tell his family, drafting but ultimately failing to send a text admitting this to her. This failure to communicate likely deepened the existing strain in their relationship. What unfolded next remains uncertain, but Saga's return to her apartment marked the beginning of the final hours of her life. As she reached out to Amin for answers and support, events escalated in a way that would tragically end both her life and the life of her unborn child. On the afternoon of April 29, 2023, Melissa Elneborg arrived at her daughter Saga's apartment in Kungsgatan. It was supposed to be a routine visit to collect a few personal items, but from the moment she reached the door, something felt off. Melissa rang the doorbell, expecting Saga or her partner Amin to answer. When no one did, she knocked loudly, calling through the letterbox, but still there was silence. Growing anxious, she used her key to unlock the door, only to find it already unlocked. A strange occurrence, as Saga was always careful about locking up, even for brief errands. Melissa stepped into the apartment, greeted by an unsettling stillness. The kitchen faucet was running, which she quickly turned off, all the while calling out for Saga. Her voice echoed unanswered. With each step, dread built in her chest. Then as she entered the bedroom, she froze. Lying on the floor between the bed and the TV stand was Saga, motionless. Her long, dark hair obscured her face, but Melissa could see blood smeared across her daughter's features. A heavy marble tabletop, weighing nearly 30 kilograms, was pressed against her throat, and a lamp cord was loosely wound around her neck. Melissa screamed in horror, dropping to her knees. She was still on the phone with her other daughter, Julia, who could only listen helplessly to her mother's anguish. Desperately, Melissa lifted the marble tabletop off Saga's neck and called emergency services, but deep down she already knew it was too late. When she tried CPR, she found Saga's body stiff and cold. Her daughter and her unborn grandson were gone. When the paramedics and police arrived, the scene they encountered was grim. Saga lay on her back, her head turned to the side, her arms by her body. Blood covered her face, particularly around her nose and mouth, and her tongue protruded slightly, a telltale sign of strangulation. Her left eye was swollen, and her dark hair was matted with dried blood. The marble tabletop had left deep impressions on her neck and thighs, as if it had been deliberately pressed down on her. Around her neck was the detached cord of a nearby lamp, though the lamp itself was undamaged, lying beneath her left shoulder. The rest of the apartment was in disarray, with drawers pulled out and clothes and jewelry scattered across the floor. At first glance, it appeared to be a robbery, but investigators quickly noted inconsistencies. Nothing valuable seemed to be missing, and there were no signs of forced entry. The scene appeared staged, pointing to a calculated attempt to mislead. The coroner's findings painted a chilling picture of Saga's final moments. She had been suffocated and strangled, likely first with the lamp cord and then with the crushing weight of the marble slab. The struggle was prolonged, lasting 5 to 10 agonizing minutes, during which Saga, heavily pregnant and unable to defend herself, would have been conscious for much of the attack. Her time of death was estimated to be between 1 and 3 a.m., hours before Melissa made the heart-wrenching discovery. As investigators pieced together the details, one thing became increasingly clear. The person responsible for this heinous act had to be someone who knew Saga well. There was no forced entry, and Saga, cautious as she was, wouldn't have let a stranger in during the late hours of the night. The staged robbery further suggested a level of familiarity and premeditation. Suspicion quickly turned toward Mohammed Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim, Saga's boyfriend and the father of her unborn child, setting the stage for a chilling investigation into a crime that would haunt Sweden for years to come. From the moment investigators arrived at Saga Elneborg's apartment, suspicion quickly fell on Mohammed Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim, her boyfriend and the father of her unborn child. His connection to Saga, combined with his inconsistent behavior and troubling history, made him the primary person of interest in what rapidly became one of Sweden's most haunting murder investigations. When police contacted Mohammed Amin to inform him of a murder at Saga's address, his reaction immediately raised red flags. Despite being her partner and aware of her address, he initially claimed not to know the location. Instead of displaying shock or concern, Mohammed Amin seemed unnervingly calm, even making lighthearted remarks to the detectives. This odd response was compounded when, unprompted, he volunteered that he had an alibi for the night of April 28, 2023. Detectives found this statement peculiar, as they had not yet questioned him about his whereabouts during the murder. When pressed, Mohammed Amin maintained that he had not seen Saga since April 27, an assertion that would soon unravel under the weight of evidence. Mohammed Amin's demeanor throughout the investigation only deepened police suspicion. When told that Saga had been murdered, he denied any involvement, yet his responses were riddled with contradictions. Initially, he claimed ignorance of Saga's whereabouts in the crime scene itself. Yet when questioned further, he made a vague statement about being with a friend, Amir, during the time of the murder, a claim that would be scrutinized in the coming days. As detectives pieced together the timeline, Mohammed Amin's alibi began to crumble. Key evidence linking Mohammed Amin to the crime, Several pieces of evidence tied Mohammed Amin to the murder, painting a picture of premeditation and a staged cover-up. DNA evidence and forensic analysis revealed Mohammed Amin's DNA under Saga's fingernails and on her clothes. This indicated physical contact between them close to the time of her death. Mohammed Amin attempted to explain the presence of his DNA by claiming it was from consensual intimacy on April 27th. However, Saga was known for her meticulous hygiene, showering daily and washing her hands frequently, especially during her pregnancy. Experts concluded it was highly unlikely the DNA would have remained on her body for 2 days, further implicating Mohammed Amin. Phone records. Mohammed Amin's phone records placed him near Saga's apartment at the time of her murder, directly contradicting his claims of being elsewhere. Cell tower data showed his phone was active in the vicinity of her residence during the early hours of April 29th, precisely when the coroner estimated Saga's death. Between 12:22 a.m. and 1:57 a.m., his phone was inexplicably inactive, a period that coincided with the murder. Investigators noted this period of inactivity was highly unusual for Mohammed Amin, who was typically a frequent phone user. Additionally, his phone signal was recorded in motion near Saga's apartment, suggesting he had traveled to her location during the night. Deleted messages and calls. Investigators discovered that after the murder, Mohammed Amin had deleted text messages and call logs between himself and Saga. While he denied tampering with his phone, digital forensics recovered these deleted communications, which provided critical insights into their relationship. Among the retrieved texts were drafts of unsent messages where Mohammed Amin expressed reluctance to tell his family about Saga's pregnancy and their plans to move in together. The deletion of these exchanges was seen as a deliberate attempt to cover his tracks. The staged robbery and gang allegations. Mohammed Amin alleged that Saga's murder was the result of gang violence. He claimed to have angered a group of criminals who had ransacked Saga's apartment and killed her in retaliation. However, this theory quickly fell apart. The apartment showed no signs of forced entry, and while drawers were pulled out and jewelry scattered, nothing valuable was missing. The chaotic scene appeared staged, designed to mislead investigators. Additionally, Mohammed Amin's friends testified that he had no known gang affiliations, and there was no evidence linking him to organized crime. His story lacked credibility and further implicated him as the primary suspect. Unmatched footprint. A single footprint found at the crime scene did not match Mohammed Amin, briefly raising the possibility of another individual's involvement. However, no evidence of a second suspect emerged, and the footprint alone could not exonerate him. Investigators considered it a minor inconsistency in an otherwise compelling case against Mohammed Amin. As detectives delved deeper into Mohammed Amin's past, they uncovered a history of troubling behavior. Text messages from late 2022 revealed he had once asked a friend to harm Saga, specifically suggesting they kick her stomach to induce a miscarriage. Additionally, internet searches from his phone included queries like, "Can fetuses die from kicking?" This disturbing history cast a sinister shadow over Mohammed Amin's relationship with Saga and provided a potential motive for the murder. Mohammed Amin's DNA, his phone records, and his inconsistent alibi placed him at the scene of the crime. His attempt to stage the apartment as a robbery, combined with the deletion of incriminating messages and the implausibility of his gang violence story, pointed to a calculated effort to evade responsibility. While the unmatched footprint left room for speculation, investigators concluded it was a minor detail compared to the overwhelming circumstantial evidence against him. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Mohammed Amin had both the motive and opportunity to commit the crime, leading to his arrest and eventual trial. The trial of Mohammed Amin Abdurrazak Ibrahim unfolded under the glare of public and media scrutiny, as prosecutors and defense lawyers clashed over his alleged role in the murder of Saga Elneborg and their unborn child. The case was fraught with emotional and cultural complexities, and though much of the evidence was circumstantial, the prosecution painted a damning portrait of a man cornered by fear and societal pressures. The prosecution's case. Prosecutors began by establishing Mohammed Amin's motive. They argued that his actions were driven by a deep fear of dishonoring his conservative Somali Muslim family. For nearly 7 months, he had hidden his relationship with Saga and her pregnancy from them, aware that they might disapprove of his having a child out of wedlock with a Swedish Christian woman. As Saga's due date approached, the pressure mounted. His refusal to tell his family about the baby or commit to Saga created a volatile situation. Prosecutors suggested that, feeling trapped and desperate to avoid both familial rejection and the responsibilities of fatherhood, Mohammed Amin saw no way out but to end both Saga's life and the life of their unborn son. To bolster their argument, the prosecution presented chilling evidence of premeditation. Text messages recovered from Mohammed Amin's phone showed that months before the murder, he had suggested harming Saga's pregnancy. In one text, he asked a friend to kick her belly to induce a miscarriage. Internet searches on his phone revealed questions such as, can fetuses die from kicking? These findings painted a dark picture of a man who had contemplated extreme measures to escape his circumstances long before the tragedy unfolded. Prosecutors also pointed to Mohammed Amin's suspicious behavior in the aftermath of Saga's death. They argued that his immediate denial of involvement, coupled with his claim of an alibi before being questioned, suggested a rehearsed story. The crime scene itself further incriminated him. Drawers had been pulled out and items were scattered, yet nothing valuable was missing, and there were no signs of forced entry. Prosecutors asserted that Mohammed Amin had staged the scene to look like a robbery, but had failed to convincingly disguise the crime. The inconsistencies in the staging only deepened suspicion. Cell tower data provided another key piece of evidence. While Mohammed Amin claimed he was elsewhere during the time of Saga's murder, phone records placed him near her apartment during the critical hours. His phone activity ceased during the estimated time of death, and both his and his friend Amir's phones were turned off simultaneously. A suspicious coincidence that prosecutors argued indicated a deliberate effort to conceal his actions. Additionally, Mohammed Amin's deletion of text messages and call logs from Saga in the hours following the murder suggested he was trying to cover his tracks. DNA evidence, though not definitive, added to the prosecution's case. Mohammed Amin's DNA was found under Saga's fingernails and on her clothes, consistent with a physical struggle. The prosecution highlighted Saga's known hygiene habits, arguing that the DNA was recent and likely deposited during the fatal encounter. The defense's case. The defense countered by focusing on gaps in the prosecution's case, emphasizing the lack of direct evidence tying Mohammed Amin to the murder. They pointed to an unmatched footprint found at the scene, arguing it suggested the possibility of another perpetrator. They also challenged the DNA evidence, claiming it could have come from consensual contact days earlier. The defense cast doubt on the prosecution's claim that the DNA was recent, stating there was no definitive timeline to link it to the night of the murder. Regarding motive, the defense rejected the idea that Mohammed Amin's cultural background and fear of family dishonor were strong enough to drive him to murder. They argued there was no proof his family was even aware of Saga's pregnancy or that they would have reacted negatively if they had known. Without concrete evidence of familial pressure, the motive was speculative at best. Throughout the trial, Mohammed Amin maintained his innocence, portraying himself as a victim of circumstantial assumptions. He insisted he loved Saga and their unborn child and accused the police of rushing to judgment without exploring alternative suspects or motives. As the trial progressed, it became clear that the case rested on the interpretation of circumstantial evidence. The prosecution's narrative was clear and cohesive, painting Mohammed Amin as a man who was trapped by fear and cultural expectations, leading him to commit a calculated act of violence. The defense, however, worked to highlight every gap and ambiguity, planting seeds of reasonable doubt wherever possible. The decision would hinge on the court's ability to connect the circumstantial dots and determine whether they were sufficient to convict. As both sides presented their final arguments, the weight of justice for Saga and her unborn child hung in the balance, leaving the court and the nation to grapple with one of Sweden's most harrowing cases. After months of investigation and a trial that gripped the nation, Swedish prosecutors presented a compelling case against Mohammed Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim, securing his conviction for the brutal murder of Saga Elneborg and her unborn child. While much of the evidence was circumstantial, the prosecution meticulously wove it into a damning narrative, leaving little doubt about Mohammed Amin's guilt. The cornerstone of the case was the alignment of DNA and phone records with the timeline of Saga's murder. DNA evidence found under Saga's fingernails and on her clothing strongly indicated physical contact during the critical hours of April 29, 2023. Although Mohammed Amin claimed the DNA was from consensual contact 2 days earlier, forensic experts dismissed this, noting Saga's meticulous hygiene habits. Furthermore, phone records placed Mohammed Amin near Saga's apartment during the estimated time of her death, contradicting his alibi. Investigators pointed to his phone's inactivity during the murder window, as well as the simultaneous shutdown of both his and his friend Amir's phones, as evidence of a deliberate attempt to conceal his actions. Equally damning were Mohammed Amin's behavioral inconsistencies during police interrogations. From the outset, his demeanor raised red flags. When informed of a murder at Saga's apartment, he feigned ignorance about her address, even though it was her primary residence and where their child would soon be born. His unnerving calmness, coupled with his unsolicited claim of an alibi before being asked about his whereabouts, suggested premeditation. Additionally, his deletion of text messages and call logs from Saga in the hours following her murder further pointed to his efforts to cover his tracks. Throughout the trial, Mohammed Amin's defense attempted to cast doubt on the evidence, proposing alternative theories, including one involving gang retaliation. He claimed criminals had broken into Saga's apartment and killed her over a dispute related to alleged contraband he had handled. However, the court found no evidence to support this claim. The lack of forced entry, combined with the staged robbery scene, dismantled the credibility of his argument. Investigators noted that nothing valuable was taken, and Saga would not have willingly let strangers into her home late at night. Additionally, testimony from Mohammed Amin's own friends refuted his claims of gang involvement, further undermining his defense. The court was ultimately persuaded by the prosecution's argument that Mohammed Amin's actions were driven by his personal fears and cultural pressures. As a Somali Muslim raised in a conservative family, he had hidden his relationship with Saga and her pregnancy from his relatives. Prosecutors argued that he feared rejection and dishonor if his family discovered that he was expecting a child out of wedlock with a Swedish Christian woman. Trapped by this looming reality, Mohammed Amin saw violence as his only escape, choosing to eliminate Saga and their unborn child rather than face the consequences. On June 5, 2024, the court delivered its verdict. Mohammed Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Saga Elneborg and her unborn son. In their decision, the judges labeled the crime honor-related, shaped by Mohammed Amin's personal fear of ostracization and his inability to reconcile his family's cultural expectations with his relationship. They concluded that his actions were premeditated, calculating, and ultimately driven by a warped sense of self-preservation. The conviction brought a measure of justice for Saga's grieving family. Her mother, Melissa, who had discovered her daughter's lifeless body, expressed relief that the truth had prevailed, though the loss remained unbearable. The tragedy sparked national conversations about honor-related crimes and the devastating impact of cultural and societal pressures. Many hoped Saga's story would serve as a warning, highlighting the need for greater awareness and protections for those caught in similar situations. While Mohammed Amin's life sentence ensured he would never harm another, the echoes of Saga's life and untimely death lingered. Her family and friends remembered her as a young woman full of hope and love, eagerly preparing for the birth of her son. Though justice was served, it could never bring back what was lost, 2 innocent lives taken far too soon. The case of Saga Elneborg and her unborn child shines a harsh light on the complex and often uncomfortable challenges that arise at the intersection of cultural assimilation, honor-related violence, and interpersonal relationships. It exposes the fragility of individuals caught between two worlds, the expectations of traditional cultural values and the realities of living in a modern, progressive society. For Mohammed Amin Abdirasek Ibrahim, these pressures collided in a way that ended in unspeakable tragedy. This case raises profound questions about how cultural and familial pressures can influence extreme behaviors. Mohammed Amin's fear of rejection and dishonor within his conservative Somali Muslim family drove him to conceal his relationship with Saga and ultimately commit an unthinkable act. His actions were not just about personal choices, but were deeply rooted in a fear of cultural ostracization and the weight of societal judgment. This dynamic highlights the silent but powerful role that cultural expectations can play in shaping individual decisions, often with devastating consequences. At its core, this tragedy underscores the need for society to confront systemic issues that contribute to such outcomes. Greater efforts are required to create spaces where open dialogue and support systems can bridge cultural divides and alleviate the pressures of conflicting values. Education, community outreach, and stronger social frameworks can help individuals navigate the complexities of multicultural identities without resorting to violence or extreme measures. Saga's story is not an isolated incident, but a painful reminder of the work that remains to ensure that cultural differences do not escalate into life-shattering tragedies. By addressing the root causes, fear, stigma, and the lack of understanding, we can hope to prevent similar events in the future. Her life and death call for a society that values compassion over judgment, inclusivity over exclusion, and humanity over tradition. The documentary invites viewers to reflect on these themes and engage in meaningful discussions about how cultural assimilation and conflicting values can sometimes lead to tragedy. What role does societal pressure play in shaping individual actions? How can communities and institutions work together to prevent such crimes in the future? These questions are not only relevant to this case, but to many others across the globe where cultural divides create silent but dangerous rifts. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your perspectives in the comments below. Let's spark a meaningful dialogue on how we can create a more understanding and inclusive world. If you found this story impactful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth true crime documentaries. Together, let's uncover stories that matter.